Starting now, you can get a transcript of each week's Rich Dad Radio Show. Just visit www.richdad.com/radio and download a copy today.
This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello. It's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. And I have a very important show for you today. And this is the question I'll ask all of you right now. The theme of it is, what is your most important asset? Let me ask it again. What is your most important asset? I'm trying to say something to you. This is your most important show you can listen to because we're talking about your greatest asset is time. And the older you get, the more precious it gets. And I remember as a kid, if people say, I don't have to worry, I'm still young. And then they fritter away the most important asset called time. And so today, a very, very important show. It's not just about time. It is about time, but it's when. And we're talking to the author, one of my favorite authors of all time, Daniel H. Pink. He wrote the book, A Whole New Mind, Why Right-Brainers Will Rule the World. And for those who do not know what that means, it means that when we're born, we have a whole brain. Then around age 4, the brain splits into a left brain and a right brain. And our academic system is geared for the left-brainers, people who are reading, writing, arithmetic. And I was kind of on the other side of the track in the right brain. I was more artistic and like music and things like this. So guys like me had a hard time, and I had to keep making that switch over from the right brain, per se, into algebra, calculus, strength of materials, physics, and all that. I struggled, yet I'm glad I did it. So Daniel Pink is the author of A Whole New Mind. You push your mind back together, Why Right-Brainers Will Rule the Future, which I agree with wholeheartedly. And he is here today to announce his latest book. It's When.
He's also the author of Drive, which was one of my favorite books, which was a fantastic book that came out in 2011, Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates.
The thing I love about Daniel Pink is he makes the obvious visible. So all of you out there, you're saying, well, when am I going to get started? When are you going to quit your job? When are you going to do this? When are you going to retire? When am I going to have kids? When should I get married? All these questions are all allocated in this silly thing called time. And so we're very happy to have him on the program here because we're here to talk about when, so you can maximize your most important asset, time.
And his book is called When, The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. We're going to talk about a lot with Daniel today. He even talks about what times of the day you're actually smarter and what times you're more creative and when you're kind of dumber.
And when you should have surgery.
It's fascinating. So Daniel, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. So you say it's not how to, it's when to.
Yeah, that's what this book is about. I mean, we make all kinds of when decisions in our life, as both of you were saying at the top. We make all kinds of when decisions in our life, from when we should do certain kinds of work to when we should exercise to when we should get married to when we should start a project or abandon a project. But we tend to make those decisions based on intuition and guesswork because we believe that timing is an art. And I believe after 2 years of research that timing is much more of a science, that there's this rich body of evidence out there that gives us some clues about how to make better, smarter, shrewder when decisions in our life and our work.
And I think that's so essential because generally Rich Dad's about the financial markets. And, like I always say to people, it's all markets go up and all markets go down. I mean, that's life in the real world. And everybody's piling into the stock market right now, and they're saying, oh, this is the perfect time to get in. And other people are saying it's the perfect time to get out. And
right.
So what you're saying there is scientific ways of analyzing when?
Absolutely. So, for instance, Kim was mentioning at the beginning, when are you? I mean, it's really well said. When are you smarter? When are you dumber? When are you more creative? And there's actually a really specific, evidence-based answer to that question that I think can change how we do our work during the day.
And how does that?
Let me say something. I'll bet you I was really stupid right after lunch.
You probably were. I just like not doing surgery, because if you're doing surgery in the early to mid-afternoon, a lot of bad things can happen. So
how does a day unfold?
Yeah, so here's a way to look at it. So our day unfolds generally in three broad stages. There's a peak, a trough, and a rebound. A peak, a trough, and a rebound. Now, most of us move through it in that order: peak, trough, rebound. People who are night owls, about 1 in 5 of us, move through it in the reverse order: recovery, trough, peak. But what the research shows very clearly is this: that during our peak, which for most of us is the morning, we should be doing our analytic work that requires heads down, focus, and attention, writing something, analyzing a report. That's when we are most vigilant, and we're able to bat away distractions. The trough, which for most of us is the early afternoon, mid-afternoon, that's not good for very much. As you guys were saying at the outset, some bad stuff can happen there. So if you look at even healthcare, you are 4 times more likely to have an anesthesia error at a procedure that begins at 3 p.m. versus 9 a.m. Endoscopists find half as many polyps in colonoscopies in afternoon exams as they do in morning exams.
Wow.
Dramatic decline in hand washing in hospitals in the afternoon. Dramatic decline.
Hand washing?
And so our performance dips considerably during that period. And so during that stage, we should be doing our our administrative work, just answering our routine emails. And then finally, that third category is in the late afternoon and early evening for most of us, is the recovery. Now, that's a really interesting period because our mood is significantly better than during the trough, but we're actually less vigilant than during the peak. And that's a very potent combination for creativity. We're open, we're loose, we're in a decent mood, so that makes it a great time for brainstorming. And what you see is that if we just make some small changes, or our bosses allow us to make some small changes, I know you guys don't believe, like as do I, don't really believe that much in bosses. But if, to the extent that people have bosses out there, having your bosses give you a little bit of leeway here, that if you move the right task to the right time, you're going to do better. And time of day effects, the research show, time of day itself, explains about 20% of the variance in how people perform at workplace tasks. So it's a big deal.
And you use an example of corporate executives giving their earnings reports and talking to investors. What happens there?
That was extraordinary. That's a piece of research out of NYU that looked at 26,000 corporate earnings calls, all of which are public companies have these earnings calls, and they're transcribed and made public. So these researchers put these transcripts into a program that measures the emotional kind of level of the words. And what they found is that calls in the afternoon were more negative and irritable than calls in the morning. And here's the kicker: even if you control for the fundamentals. So if you're reporting terrible earnings, you're going to be probably a little bit negative. If you had 8 factories burned down, you're going to be a little bit negative. But even if you control for that, the afternoon calls were more negative and irritable to the point where it had a short-term effect on stock price.
And let me ask you this: so you're giving these earnings reports to the investors. You're also giving it to publicists, right, and to journalists. If it's in the afternoon, are they going to write a more negative report?
It could be, and certainly what's leaking out there is negative sentiment. And so if they're just accurately reflecting what the sentiment is, then it's going to be more negative. And so and as you know, these corporate earnings reports, they hit the online, almost instantly. So this is why they have, and it's terrifying in a way. You have a short-term effect on the stock price, and so again. Here's the big problem here is that we tend to think that, what we do matters, how we do it matters, who we do it with matters, and they do, but we give short shrift to the question of when. And these questions of when have a material effect on our work, on our investments, even on our broader well-being.
So let me ask you this question, because we have a Twittering president. Everybody now waits for him to tweet in the morning. What do you think's happening?
Oh, man, I have no idea what's happening to that. But,
maybe.
I mean, talk about a morning press conference.
Yeah. Although, I have to say that those, if you look at believe it or not, no joke, there's research on looking at the pattern of people's moods over the course of a day using Twitter. And what it shows is exactly this peak-trough rebound, where people's mood is generally better in the morning, dips significantly in the early afternoon and then rebounds again in the late
That's
afternoon.
great news. Hey,
I think that
Go ahead.
I'm not sure the president is ever in that great of a mood, at least when he's on Twitter. I think Twitter is a way for him to vent his negative moods.
Good point.
Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today we're talking about your most important asset, which is your time. And when are you at peak? When are you good? And when are you bad? When is the best time to do things? But the question is not time, but when you do something, right, Kim?
Yeah, it's this is fascinating because it's a whole new study, Daniel, that I've never really paid. I think we've just taken this for granted and made a lot of assumptions that aren't correct. And there was one piece that you wrote about that in the afternoon you said that people are more likely to be dishonest. They're more likely to cheat, steal, and engage in other unethical behavior in the afternoon. Why is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's something, the why of it is actually complicated, and I'm not sure scholars necessarily know that. But the fact of it is very clear. And there's a little bit of nuance here. Let me take a step back here. That all of us have different chronotypes. That is, there's a whole field of chronobiology. And chronotype is basically, are you a morning person or an evening person or in between? And about 15% of us are very strong morning people, very strong larks.
1-5?
15%.
1-5, yeah.
Okay.
20% of us are very strong owls, and most of us are kind of in the middle. And so what the research initially showed was that something that they called the morning morality effect, that people were more likely to be moral in the morning, less likely to cut ethical corners in the morning. But what subsequent research found out is that it all had to do with when people were in their optimal time. So actually, night owls were actually more ethical later in the day, and the people in the intermediate people, what I call third birds and larks, were more ethical in the morning. So there's something about being in your optimal time that makes you more vigilant. And so, don't have a night owl make an ethical decision in the morning, and don't have a lark make an ethical decision at 9 o'clock at night.
So when we come back, I'm going to ask you questions about how you do business with a vulture who is unethical all the time. I have a couple of those in my life. I'm only kidding. When we come back, we're talking to Daniel Pink. We're talking about your most important asset, which is your time. And the question is, when do you do something for the most effect? We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Don't be like Charlie. Charlie is that do-it-yourselfer who does himself in. Do-it-yourself is good for tile and grout. It is not good for asset protection. Charlie thought he'd save a few dollars forming his LLC online. With no guidance, he did it wrong. When he sold the property, he lost thousands and thousands of dollars. He did himself in by trying to do it himself. Don't burn yourself. Use Corporate Direct to set up and maintain your LLCs and corporations. Corporate Direct is owned and operated by attorney and rich dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Garrett wrote the bestsellers Loopholes of Real Estate and Start Your Own Corporation. He is Robert Kiyosaki's attorney for asset protection. He and his team will do it right. Visit them at corporatedirect.com or call 800-600-1760. Mention Rich Dad and receive $100 off your formation fee. That's corporatedirect.com. corporatedirect.com.
Your financial education continues. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Radio Show.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. We're talking about your most important asset. Rich, poor, or middle class, your most important asset is your time. And when you're young, you kind of say, I don't have to worry, I have a lot of time. And you get older, you say, I got to get stuff done because I don't have much time left. So it's really not about time. We're talking about the subject of when do you get started? When do you do things? When are you most effective? When are you most productive? When is the best time to deliver bad news? When should you have open heart surgery or brain surgery? It's when. So you can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android, and all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive them for two reasons. One is repetition is how we learn best. And the second thing is that you have friends, family, or business associates, get together, listen to this program and discuss it. If you listen to it and discuss it as a group, you'll be surprised at how much you will learn. And our guest today is Daniel Pink. He is the author of one of my favorite books, A Whole New Mind, why right-brainers will rule the future. I like that thought, Comments, Kim?
I like that thought, too. And Daniel's also the author of Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And you've probably seen his YouTube where he's doing all the drawings as he's talking about the book and the different points of the book. One of the first persons to do that. Also the author of To Sell is Human, The Surprising Truth About Moving Others. And today, his latest book just out is called When, The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. And I highly, highly recommend it because I think we all make assumptions that are maybe not correct, and we take the whole thing of time and when we do things for granted. So this is eye-opening to me.
And I haven't read the book, but I'd love to read To Sell is Human, The Surprising Truth About Moving Others, is because I grew up in a family. My poor dad, he and my mother, they all thought salesmen were crooks. There was such a negative bias towards salesmen. And that bias can affect your entire life because if you can't sell, there's no income. Sales equals income. So anyway, we're very excited about having Daniel Pink here, and we're talking about time. I want to ask a quick question. In my Hispanic, Latina, and Latino friends, they were known for taking siestas. And in the American culture, as you know, it was pretty much frowned upon that you take a siesta because Americans are driven. We got to keep producing. What have you found out about taking a break?
Well, we were talking earlier about that afternoon trough and all the bad things that can happen there, and the remedy for that is breaks. What we know now about breaks is actually extraordinary. The science of breaks is telling us very, very clearly that we should be taking more breaks, and we should be taking certain kinds of breaks. Now, it doesn't have to be a full-fledged, 2.5-hour siesta where you have a giant meal and go home and have a nap.
Oh, that sounds
However, what it does show is that, and I'll tell you, I'm a sinner here. I've been saved. I was very much someone who never took breaks because I thought it was better to power through.
Yes.
Me too. Yes. Me too.
So sort of hyper Puritan, hyper masculine, don't take breaks. And I always thought that, amateurs take breaks, professionals don't. And based on this research, I was completely 100% wrong. Amateurs are the ones who don't take breaks. Professionals don't take breaks. You look at how professionals in any field, whether they're athletes or musicians, they regularly take breaks. We should be doing the same thing. And what we know about breaks is that they restore our attention. They can reduce these medical errors. We see kids, some great research showing that kids do significantly worse on standardized tests when they take them in the afternoon, but you give them a 20 to 30-minute recess right before the test, their scores go back up. So what we know about breaks is, again, that we should be taking more of them, but we also know we should be taking certain kinds of breaks.
What kind of breaks?
What the science tells us is, number one, that something is better than nothing. So even a 5-minute break can be restorative. The second thing is that social is better than solo, even for introverts. So you're better off taking a break with somebody else. The third thing is movement is better than being stationary. So if you can take a break that involves some kind of movement, walking around, that's better. Fourth, and there's some great research on this. I found it really stunning to me is how much nature can be a replenisher. Simply being outside, seeing trees, seeing grass. And finally, and this is, I think, the most important one in 2018, given how we lead our lives, which is that fully detached beats semi-detached. So you really want to detach when you take your break. So if you go out for a nature walk outside and your nose is in your Instagram feed, that doesn't count. So you want to leave your phone behind, and when you take a break, you actually might want to talk about something other than work. And so what we need to do, and how I've changed my own behavior, is that every afternoon I write down, or on my list of things to do during the day, I write down 2 afternoon breaks that I'm going to take. I write down a break list. I write down what I'm going to do, when I'm going to take the break, and what I'm going to do. And I'm talking like 15-minute breaks to walk around the clock, to walk around the block. But to be very intentional and deliberate about scheduling those breaks and taking them can make a world of difference in that afternoon trough.
And I find it very interesting. You touched on the Denmark study where the kids took a test in the morning did better than the kids that took a test in the afternoon. But when the kids took a break in the afternoon, they actually did better than the morning.
Exactly.
However, our school system is getting rid of recess and breaks, and they want to put the power through the kids to get better grades, which is going to lead to worse grades. Correct? It's crazy.
I'm shaking. I mean, this is the problem with radio is that you can't see your guests shaking their heads in disbelief. That's what I'm doing now. You're exactly right, Kim. I mean, that's it's so misguided. And the good news here is that there is evidence, and I think my belief, maybe I'm naive, is that over time people can be persuaded by evidence. And what you see now is some very intriguing research out of Texas with low income kids, showing that the way to boost their standardized test scores is to give them more breaks, 4 recesses a day, because human beings are not meant to go and go and go and go and go without any moment of recharging. We always recharge our phones, but we don't recharge ourselves. And again, to me, the evidence here is just overwhelming.
So what you're also saying then, there's a new buzzword called multitasking.
Yeah.
So you're on the treadmill and you're reading a book.
Yeah.
And then you're listening to a headset on your Audible. Okay. Can I ask another thing that was part of my generation with entrepreneurs was that, sleep was for losers? Because I had this one guy, I forget his name now, he was a very successful guy, and he was bragging that if he got more than 4 hours sleep, he hated himself. So he tasked himself to just stay constantly awake, less than 3 hours sleep and keep going. And you're saying that has completely changed now, right, in the findings?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right, Robert, on that. I mean, and I think it's a big change. Even, let's say, 15 years ago, it's partly in the entrepreneurial culture, but I think even in the broader work culture, somebody who came in, like that guy, someone who came into the office and said, I pulled an all-nighter last night. I only got 2 hours. I haven't gotten more than 2 hours of sleep any night for the last 2 weeks. I would look at that person 15 years ago as heroic, because that was very difficult for me to do. So I'm so frail, I'm such a wimp. And now what happened, though, and this is back to the point about evidence, is that the science of sleep began emerging. And we now understand that person who's pulling all-nighters and going by 2 hours of sleep is not a hero. He's probably a fool. He's hurting his performance. He might be hurting other people's performance. And I think that the science of breaks is where the science of sleep was 15 years ago, that we're about to have a change in, exactly as you're saying, Robert, in how we see breaks. And what we've got to do is we've got to see breaks not as a deviation from performance, but as part of performance. As I said before, something that professionals do, not something that amateurs do.
The other thing is I noticed that when the Internet came out, a lot of these coders, they would never sleep. They just stayed up, drinking Monster and Red Bull and coffee and just powering through the coding. And that was part of the culture, or is still part of the culture.
I mean, I think every once in a while that's all right, but as a sustained, first of all, I think it's probably overstated. I think there's some mythology there and their own self-reports about all of it. But as a sustained practice, it's a terrible idea. It goes against everything that chronobiologists, sleep scientists have learned about how human beings perform. You see the same thing with going. Let's go to teenagers. All right, with school start times for teenagers, you have a lot of these kids going to school early in the morning. They're sleep deprived. They're not performing better. They're performing worse, which is why you have the American Academy of Pediatrics saying to school districts all over America, please, 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 please do not start school for teenagers before 8:30 in the morning.
Is that right? My God. Hey, other thing crucial is you're talking about group timing and syncing with the boss.
Yeah.
Because in our company, people have just they don't come to work when they want to, and they just sync out. And so they work at home and all this stuff. What's your thought on that?
Well, I think there's certain kinds of group timing when groups have to be perfectly synchronized, so that a choir or a rowing team, that requires there to be a very clear boss. I think for most places that don't require that perfect synchronization in time, what you want is you want to give people the liberty to match the time to their task. So, one of the problems we have with night owls is that the conventional work culture forces night owls to come in at 8 o'clock for a staff meeting, and they're miserable. And, looks at them as slackers if they don't come in to the office early. What you want to let those people do is you want to let them work in the late afternoon and early evening.
Right, but that also goes on with marriages, right? You have a morning person, a night person.
Oh, actually, you know what? You're totally right about that. And part of that is that men tend to be owlier than women. More of a night men tend to be more evening people, more evening than women, and so you often have a little bit of a mismatch. I mean, I know that my wife goes up to sleep at 10 o'clock, and I'm like, come on, don't you want to hang out? Come on. Over time, when we get older and older and older, it's the men and women chronotype starts to be much more similar.
That's good news. Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. We're talking to one of my favorite authors, Daniel Pink. He's the author of A Whole New Mind, Why Right Brainers Will Rule the World. That's the artistic types. Drive, the surprising truth about what motivates us. And today we're talking about his latest book, When, the Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. His website is danpink.com, danpink.com. And he's a very important person at this time of civilization's evolution. So when we come back, we'll be finding out more of what you can do to maximize your most important asset, which is your time.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Advisors have a great gift for you. Visit richdadadvisors.com and receive 5 free reports on business and investing success. 5 free reports that can help you right now. And while there, check out the Author's Choice audio series. Audio is a great way to learn. And for as little as 99 cents, you can download key chapters from all the Rich Dad Advisor books. You can listen to The Myths and Magic of Real Estate Investing, 7 Steps to Limited Liability, The 4 Pillars of Investing, Team Code of Honor, or The Psychology of Debt, among other great audios. For pennies, you can power up your skills for getting out of the rat race. So please visit richdadadvisors.com for your 5 free reports and your powerful and affordable audio chapters. That's richdadadvisors.com for great information that can help you right now.
This is the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today we're talking about your most important asset, my asset, your everything, is time. As I said earlier, when I'm younger, I always said, oh, I don't have to worry, I'm still young. And now that I'm older, I said, holy mackerel, I better get going. And so our guest today is Daniel H. Pink. He's one of my favorite authors. Again, A Whole New Mind. I love that book, Why White Brands Will Rule the World. And Kim loves the book, Drive, the surprising truth about what motivates us. To sell is human, the surprising truth about moving others. If you're an entrepreneur, you got to read that book. Because remember, money comes from other people's pockets, not yours. And then today we're talking about When, the Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. So once again, you can listen to Rich Dad Radio Show on your time anywhere on iTunes or Android. All of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. But anyway, the show is about the good news and bad news about money. I'm going to ask Daniel this question. How do you give bad news? Because that's part of life. How do you give bad news?
I have good news and I have bad news.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has said that, right,
Yep.
Kim? I mean, I've got good news and bad news. I don't know how many times I've said.
Yep.
I have yet to find any human being who hasn't said that. And so the question is, and it's a timing question, is what do you give first, the good news or the bad news? And what I typically have done is give the good news first. And the reason is that, it's uncomfortable giving bad news. So you want to, I always wanted to ease into it. Some of it is also you don't want to be a complete aggressive jerk at the outset. You want to lay down a cushion before delivering the blow. And that ends up being completely wrong. And there's some interesting research out there by Angela Legg and Kate Sweeney showing that if you ask people, what do you want to hear first, the good news or the bad news? Forget about delivering the news. Vast majority of people want to have the bad news first. And the reason for that has to do with one aspect of endings on our life, which is that given a choice, human beings prefer endings that elevate. We prefer rising sequences to declining sequences. And so this is one thing that in the research that has completely changed how I do things. I always give the bad news first, followed by the good.
And how else does endings, when you talk about endings, what do you mean by endings? How else does that play out in our life?
Any kind of ending. So I'll tell you something else that's I think it's really super interesting. So this is research from Adam Alter at NYU and Hal Hirschfield at UCLA. So what is the age at which people are most likely to run their first marathon? Okay, what's the age at which people are most likely to run their first marathon? And what they found out is that the age that people are most likely to run their first marathon is age 29. Okay, it's sort of a weird number. And then you unpack it, though, it turns out that 29-year-olds are twice as likely to run their first marathon as 28-year-olds and 30-year-olds. Huh. Right? There's no physiological difference between 28-year-olds and 29-year-olds, between 29-year-olds and 30-year-olds, but 29-year-olds are much more likely to run a first marathon. Guess what other age people are likely to run their first marathon? 39. Guess what other age? 49. 49-year-olds are 3 times more likely to run a first marathon than 50-year-olds. And so this is another effect of endings. Endings energize us. They get us to move, and so this
it's the end of a decade. It's the end of a decade.
Hey, Daniel, that's brilliant. Endings energize us.
Absolutely, endings of all kind, and it's really interesting if you start. This is part of the challenge here is that we're not thinking about this aspect of our life, but it's playing this invisible role. So the end of a decade is kind of an arbitrary thing. It doesn't have any real significance physically, and yet you have people acting in ways that are very different because they're seeing the end. I'll give you another one. It's quite interesting. I think it's really important for entrepreneurs or marketers out there, which is it's work by Ayelet Fishbach at the University of Chicago. And so she had 2 groups of people, all of whom got a gift certificate that they could cash in. One group had 3 weeks to cash it in. The other group had 2 months. And it turned out that the group that had less time was 5 times as likely to cash it in as the group that had more time, because the ending was more apparent. They could see the ending. It had a harder deadline, and that's kind of weird because you have 2 months. You have like 2.5 times as much time to use this gift certificate, and yet people didn't use it as much because the ending wasn't as clear and obvious.
But the other thing you talked about choir or singing in a chorus.
Yeah.
How does that affect our life?
Wow, this is. Robert, I was really blown away by this research. So I read about how we talked about this a little bit earlier. How do groups synchronize in time? Groups that have to be perfectly in sync with one another. So rowing teams, choirs, and what the research on choral singing it's remarkable. So let's take physically choral. If you were to draw somebody's blood, measure their immunoglobulin levels, which is a measure of their immune response, measure their immunoglobulin, then have them sing in a choir. Then take their blood again and measure their immunoglobulin one more time, they would have a heightened immune response. That is, their immune response would have improved. Singing in a choir raises people's pain threshold. So, in fact, it's actually being a treatment now for certain kinds of cancer patients dealing with severe pain. It has a significant mood boost. It can be a prophylactic against depression. But what's also amazing about it is that when people engage in these kinds of synchronous activities where they're in time with other people, afterwards they're more likely to help others. They're more likely to be open to people who don't look like them. I mean, they act in better, more generous, more charitable ways. And what's fascinating about the choral singing research is that it's not about singing. When people sing solo, they don't do these things. They don't have an elevated pain threshold. They don't have a heightened immune response. But there's something about singing in a group. And if you unpack all this, I mean, there's a very strong argument that singing in a choir is about as good for your mind, body, and soul as physical exercise.
Wow, that's amazing. And
that is. Yes, I thank you.
It's
for saying
amazing to
that.
me. I was blown away by that.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
And so you say other types of activities, like you talk about rowing on a rowing team. It's very synchronistic.
I captain my rowing team,
yeah.
which is a fantastic sport.
Well, rowing. Well, here's something interesting about rowing. And there's some really good research out of Oxford on this. Is that you measure? So rowing is an event. As Robert, is an event lathered in pain. All right. It's a painful sport, and yet when you measure how much pain people experience, rowing alone and rowing in sync, like on an 8-person crew team, the people who are rowing on the 8-person crew team experience less pain than the people who are rowing alone.
And you know why I signed up for the rowing team? Because I went to military school. The pain was so high in academics, I had to do something that was more painful. So I went out for rowing. But that was the only way I could get through the day. Was my pain was so high for the 2 hours of rowing that I could face the pain of the military school.
And there's something. I mean, they've identified this thing that, called we've heard of runner's high, called rower's high, about rowing in groups with other people. Gives us a higher and higher pain threshold. There's a great book called The Boys on the Boat about.
I just got that for my mom. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a terrific book about this team of American rowers and the underdogs in the 1936 Olympics. But the author of that book, when he's describing the rowers there, he has this really lovely turn of phrase where he says about these rowers: effort turned to ecstasy. Effort turned to ecstasy.
It's a high.
And it turns out that there's that the research on the physiology of rowing and synchronous activities shows that very clearly. And it's really curious. Like, there's something about being in sync, in time with other people, that makes us feel good and that makes us do good.
So it's not just being on a team; it's that synchronistic aspect of it.
There are advantages on being on a team, but there's something about being in a group enterprise where you're timed together. Rowing, for instance, as I said, choral singing, group dancing, that somehow makes people feel exceptionally good. And I think the super cool thing is, at some level, makes them better people. There's research on kids showing that if you take two groups of kids, one of them plays a kind of synchronous clap and tap game with the teacher, and the other one plays just a totally fun game. Afterwards, the kids who played the synchronous game are more likely to help the teacher, and this is, I think, really interesting, more likely to want to play with kids from a different race.
So, add to that, I flew for the Marine Corps, and I remember one of my instructors saying to me that formation flying was the bread and butter of military pilots.
Interesting.
And I didn't understand what he said until you start flying flying in formation is so terrifying because you're so close. You can see the bolts on the other guy's aircraft. And you're up close. You're going around at 200 miles an hour, flying through the skies. But once you get over that fear, the joy, the euphoria of flying in a flight of four, going into combat is a higher high than I've ever experienced in my life. And then we would all tune into the same radio station as we're flying into combat in Vietnam, and our favorite song was Black is Black. We all be singing away, flying in formation, flying into death, but we were high as kites.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
No drugs.
I actually wish I would have written about that, because it's like this multiple form of synchrony.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So the exterior environment is combat, and we could see where we're going, the fighting up ahead. At the same time as flight of four helicopters flying together going in. And it was just euphoria. And it's hard to describe to people.
Yeah.
It's the same as my rowing team. The pain was so excruciating. But you crossed that finish line, the euphoria was out of sight.
Now you have to join a choir, Robert.
but that's what I was saying to earlier. Is in our old business, we used to sing all the time.
Yeah, we did.
And then we got the gains in people's lives were so high. Exactly as it says, it took them out of their pain of their everyday life, and that's what we were doing. So I'm so glad
learning,
you explained it to me.
You know who else? You know who else did that as a teacher is Daniel Kahneman, the guy who won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
He when he was teaching statistics, which is for some people
painful.
Another enterprise lather and agony. He would teach it by having them sing songs about stats, and he found that made it easier for them to understand some of the principles.
That's
Say,
fantastic.
Daniel, we're out of time, but, man, I want to tell you something. Your work is fantastic.
Thank you. I so appreciate
Kim
that.
has
I have one final question, because all the research here is fascinating. And so, as a business owner, what would I take away? How could I make my team and my business better based on all this research?
So a few things. So the most important thing is be as intentional about when as you are about who, what, and how. Make sure that people in your team are doing the right tasks at the right time of day. Analytic tasks during the peak, administrative tasks during the trough. creative tasks during the recovery. Make sure you integrate breaks into the workplace because they're part of performance. And then also be very conscious of the episodic nature of business and life. So the beginnings have one effect, midpoints have another effect, endings have another effect, and then, most important, always give the bad news first.
Got it.
Daniel,
Beautiful.
thank you very, very
Thank
much.
you so
Once
much.
again, you hit it out of the park. So thank
you.
you for your research, and thanks for enlightening the world.
Thank you for having me on the program. It's been a joy.
Thank you.
Keep up
You're
the
a
great,
joy.
great work.
What-
Your gift.
Once again, his website is danpink.com. Please check his work out.
And please
when we
get the
come
book.
back, we'll be going to the most popular part of our program is Ask Robert.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Don't be like Charlie. Charlie is that do-it-yourselfer who does himself in. Do-it-yourself is good for tile and grout. It is not good for asset protection. Charlie thought he'd save a few dollars forming his LLC online. With no guidance, he did it wrong. When he sold the property, he lost thousands and thousands of dollars. He did himself in by trying to do it himself. Don't burn yourself. Use Corporate Direct to set up and maintain your LLCs and corporations. Corporate Direct is owned and operated by attorney and rich dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Garrett wrote the bestsellers Loopholes of Real Estate and Start Your Own Corporation. He is Robert Kiyosaki's attorney for asset protection. He and his team will do it right. Visit them at corporatedirect.com or call 800-600-1760. Mention Rich Dad and receive $100 off your formation fee. That's corporatedirect.com. corporatedirect.com.
Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Advisors have a great gift for you. Visit richdadadvisors.com and receive 5 free reports on business and investing success. 5 free reports that can help you right now. And while there, check out the Author's Choice audio series. Audio is a great way to learn. And for as little as 99 cents, you can download key chapters from all the Rich Dad Advisor books. You can listen to The Myths and Magic of Real Estate Investing, 7 Steps to Limited Liability, The 4 Pillars of Investing, Team Code of Honor, or The Psychology of Debt, among other great audios. For pennies, you can power up your skills for getting out of the rat race. So please visit richdadadvisors.com for your 5 free reports and your powerful and affordable audio chapters. That's richdadadvisors.com for great information that can help you right now.
Log on to richdadradio.com while you listen. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Our guest today was Daniel Pink, author of A Whole New Mind, Why Right-Brainers Will Rule the Future. And I love that book because in our old business, Kim and I, we would have people come to class with colored pencils and blank notepads. Sketch pads. So they would take notes by drawing pictures and colors and all that because it engaged the right brain. And we sung songs. And we'd sometimes start the day singing, rock and roll songs, which made everybody happy. End of the day, we'd have rock and roll songs made everybody happy.
You know what else we did?
But you go to school, that's not allowed.
Yeah, and you know what else we did is Daniel said one of the best ways to reset or reprogram during in the afternoon is to take breaks, and the importance of taking breaks. We took a break every hour in our seminars. Every hour we would take a 15-minute break, and it lets the mind reset. So this is fascinating. The book, When, The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing, I highly recommend it, and I can't wait to finish reading it.
And what we used to do, rather than take a break sometimes, have people discuss, because as he says, you don't take a break alone.
Yeah.
So our breaks became discussion points, and they actually worked better because it refreshed you to ready for the next hour. So that's my justification. Sometimes we don't take a break, but we spend about 15 minutes discussing because it brings them back into the room and they're ready to go again. So that's why I love Daniel Pink's work. Great book. And so I thank him. And going to Ask Robert now. And you can submit your questions to Ask Robert at richdadradio.com. Melissa, what's the questions?
Our first question today comes from Emma in Overland Park, Kansas. Favorite book, Rich Woman.
Hey, Emma, thank you very much.
Smart
Appreciate
woman.
it.
She says, Robert and Kim, would you each describe how you start your day? Do you have routines? Do you do them together or separately?
May I answer that question? Because Daniel Pink was talking about it. I'm one of those guys that never slept, and I thought it was a macho thing to do. But it cost me my health. And my day would start off, I'd get up 3 o'clock in the morning. For some reason, I wake up at 3 o'clock. I drink 50,000 cups of coffee, hit my to-do list, and start checking it off. And then I said, well, I'll exercise in the afternoon. And I never exercised. I never took a break. And then I was exhausted. And pretty soon my health went way, way, way down to the point around 2007, 2008. I was in serious trouble. Not only mentally, emotionally, but physically, spiritually. So then this book comes out. It's called Miracle Morning. Please get that book, because that book changed my life. And what this book was talking about is how you start your morning is how you start your life. So at first it was really hard. So I would get up, and he said, meditate. And if I meditated 2 minutes, it was a long time. And then read not my to-do list, not The Economist or the Wall Street Journal. I had to read an inspirational book, something like a Daniel Pink book, or I had so many book, Rules for a Night and all this. It just got my spirit in going. And then I would spend about 10 minutes working out. And what's happened over time, as Kim has seen it, now I meditate for an hour, I work out for an hour, and I read for about an hour before I start my day. And that has changed my whole outlook on life. I actually sleep more. Any comments on that, Kim?
No, I've seen a huge change since you've done that routine. And, they say the first 30 minutes of the start of your day, the last 30 minutes at the end of your day are so important. And
right.
I'm certainly not as
disciplined
as you are, because I'm really working on that first.
Disciplined.
No, I'm working on that first 30 minutes to really use it to my best use. And I typically will read something from a personal development book. I'm getting into meditation more, but the first 30 minutes to focus on more what I'm grateful for, instead of getting out of bed and going, got to do this, got to do that, got to do this, got to do this. Yes, I want to kind of slow down that first 30 minutes and read a little bit, something inspirational, and do my gratitude process.
So the book is called Miracle Morning. The author is Hal Elrod. He's been a guest on our program, but that book has changed my life. My health has got up. I sleep more. I'm exercising more. I'm doing things more. And I'm somewhat a bit more pleasant. So anyway, it does work. Is that first is how you start your morning, is how you start your life. Like this morning I got up, I said, I don't have time to exercise, the normal routine. And I just go out, and it's not I still work out in the afternoons and things like this, but I start my day with this morning was another 45 minutes of exercise, basically stretching and things like this. The biggest change was that instead of drinking coffee in the morning, I drink 3 glasses of water, then I have my coffee. But if I don't drink that water, I don't flush the radiator. I don't flush the system. So I drink my 3 glasses of water, about 8 ounces each. I work out, let the body flush it, and then I have my coffee, which I'm addicted to.
And I think, too, after reading When by Dan Pink, that's going to change my day as terms of my work day and what I work on and where I focus on. As he said, in the afternoon where your energy is usually down and you're in that trough, that's where you kind of do the mundane, answer emails, not the creative thinking and not the tough phone calls that have to be made. Those are done in the morning.
Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from William in Bend, Oregon.
Oh, I like Bend, Oregon.
Ben's gorgeous.
Beautiful.
God, it's gorgeous.
Beautiful.
William's favorite book is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He says, how do you deal with procrastination? Do you ever feel unmotivated to do what you need to do? If so, how do you reset and get back on track?
That's a fantastic question. And again, that's a book. There's a process called the Kolbe process, because we're all different. I'm one of those persons that I wait till the last minute. And
me too.
It's Kolbe. Please get that. I think it's cost $50 to do an analysis of yourself. And there's people who start early. But the Kolbe system, I don't worry about it anymore. I'm always working, but if I have a project, I wait till the last minute. And I don't know why, but I'm more effective that way. So I just stopped worrying about procrastinating and just kind of got on with what I had to do, knowing I had this project coming up. So the way I handle my procrastination, I give myself what I call a deadline. I hate that word, but I'm going to do something on this date. And the way I get it is I say, everybody's going to come together. I'll do it on this date. And because everybody's going to show up and I'm going to do it, then I have to do it. But if I don't give myself some event where embarrassment is paramount, I probably don't do it. The point with Kolbe is we're all different. And if you analyze Kolbe, You may be better, is Kolbe.com, do an analysis of yourself. And then you can better live with yourself, is what I'm saying. There's some people who are analysis paralysis and they don't do anything. And I'm one of those guys that waits to the last minute and does it. But I learned more than the guy who analyzed everything.
Well, and I do the same thing. I mean, I procrastinate. I wait to the last minute. So I also give myself a deadline. And one of the things I do is I make sure that there's other people counting on me to deliver. So that brings it up for me. And speaking of Kolbe, I still remember in Kolbe, she talked about my Kolbe and my personality is that I do wait to the last minute. So she says, so if you're going to if Kim needs a deadline, she's talking to our company, if Kim needs a deadline, give her a deadline. But don't give her a fake deadline. Don't say it needs to be here on Monday when it really needs to be there on Thursday, because that will upset her. And sure enough, that happened like a month later. Somebody gave me a fake deadline and I went ballistic. So I operate well on deadlines, but especially if somebody else or some other people are counting on me to deliver on that time.
And Kolbe, Kolbe, has this great analytics of how you put a team together. It's the best I have ever seen because we're all different. And they have a thing called a matrix. And we have 12 different character types. You're going to be successful in business. You want all 12. We only have one each. So it takes at least 12 to kind of fill it in.
Which is why it's so difficult for somebody in the S, in the self-employed quadrant, because they don't have that team around them with the different skills and they're trying to do everything, and nobody has those 12 parts of the matrix.
And we had Shauna Core on, who was talking about big potential.
Big potential.
He says the trouble with too many people, they measure people by college degrees, but not by traits. You don't have to have a college degree to be a great team player. So this whole thing what academics is doing, which is I love what Daniel Pink is saying, academics has a lot to answer for. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Brian in Atlanta, Georgia. Favorite book, Midas Touch. His question is about the choice of partners. With experience, he says, I have come to know that your team, not money, defines success for any business. Is it simply an art for partnering, or is there a science to it? Can you make a person into the kind of partner that you need?
That's a very important question,
yeah.
Because money is a function of the people around you.
Absolutely.
And again, it's all the books we bring to you, like Daniel Pink, Shauna Core with a big potential. We had Landon Thorne yesterday talking about Bitcoin and how that functions. And we had Chris Voss talking about how you negotiate. The toughest negotiation is not with a hostage. Your toughest negotiation is your husband, wife, and kids, and your business partner. What I'm saying here is if you have a partner that doesn't want to learn, you stagnate. That's the whole part of it, right, Kim?
Absolutely. And it's one thing that we did early on is we made a decision. If we were going to read a book, we were going to read it together. If we were going to attend a seminar, we're going to attend it together because we wanted to grow together and learn together.
So the Rich Dad Radio Show is just an extension of what Kim and I do in real life. So the big thing about partner goes back to Kolbe. Very important, Kolbe, for not only for your kids, but for your spouse, your husband, wife, or boyfriend, or whatever it is because what Kathy Kolbe, the creator of the Kolbe profile, said that when you get married, you're marrying a different kind of person if you're going to have kids.
Yeah, you want somebody opposite of you.
Yeah, so like Kim and I were not going to have children. We knew that at the start, so we have a different type of Kolbe. Why marriages break up is that when the kids leave, the person you're married is opposite of you, and you can't stand the guy or woman. So Kolbe has a great insights into who you are, and it's really helped Kim and I a lot because we knew we weren't going to have children, but we have other friends who, when the kids leave, they leave, because they can't stand each other. And unfortunately, what I see now more and more is what I call the $1 million divorce. Is it costs millions of dollars to divorce.
And one other thing to that, too, is that Kolbe tells you, like, who you are, shows you who you are. And in business, as a business partner, we often say, you need to be the kind of partner that you're looking for versus trying to change somebody to be something else. Just be the partner that you want in business.
So it's Kolbe, Kolbe. Again, I want to thank Daniel Pink. Also want to recommend Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning. So you can submit your questions once again to richdadradio.com to ask Robert, and thank you all for listening.